My name is Ethan Carter. I am 29 years old, and I work as a mechanic. If you asked my family who I was, they would probably call me the disappointment. My older brother, Ryan, is a successful lawyer. My younger sister, Sophie, is a doctor. I am the son who never finished college. The trouble started long before this dinner. My phone rang while I was closing my shop. Ethan, don't forget Sunday, my mother said. I know. It's your father's and my anniversary dinner. I got the invitation. Good. Try not to be late. Before I could answer, she hung up. I stared at the phone and sighed. My coworker Jake walked over. Bad news? Family dinner. He laughed. That sounds like bad news. You have no idea. What's the plan? Show up. Get judged. Go home. That bad? Worse. He shook his head. Then why go? I thought about it for a moment. Because part of me keeps hoping they'll change. Sunday arrived faster than I wanted. As I drove my old truck toward my parents' house, I could already hear Ryan's jokes in my head. Nice truck, Ethan. Still fixing cars? Must be hard watching everyone else succeed. The sad part was that I didn't need to imagine those comments. I had heard versions of them for years. When I parked outside, I almost stayed in the truck. Just leave, I muttered. But I didn't. I grabbed the gift I had bought for my parents and walked inside. The house was already crowded. My mother spotted me first. You're late. I checked my watch. I'm 3 minutes early. Close enough. Good to see you too, Mom. She frowned and walked away. I had barely stepped inside when Ryan appeared. There he is, he said. The mysterious mechanic. Hi, Ryan. Truck still running? Most days. That's impressive. I thought it would have retired before you. A few relatives chuckled. I forced a smile. Nice seeing you too. Before he could answer, Sophie joined us. Hey, Ethan. Hey. How's work? Busy. That's good. For a second, I thought the conversation might stay normal. Then she added, you ever think about going back to school? There it was. Not really. You're smart enough. I'm happy where I am. She gave me a doubtful look. Sure. I walked away before the conversation could continue. Near the dining room, someone touched my arm. I turned and smiled. Megan. My cousin hugged me. You look stressed. I wonder why. She laughed. Ryan already started. Within 30 seconds. A new family record. You're the only reason I come to these things. I'm honored. For the first time that evening, I relaxed a little. Megan had always treated me like a person instead of a project that needed fixing. We spent several minutes talking about work, movies, and everyday life. No comparisons. No criticism. Just a normal conversation. It felt strange. Eventually everyone gathered around the large dining table. My father stood. Thank you all for coming. People applauded. I watched him smile at the room. Part of me wondered if he noticed how uncomfortable I felt whenever these dinners happened. If he did, he never said anything. As food was served, conversations filled the room. Laughter echoed across the table. Glasses clinked. Smiles appeared everywhere. From the outside, we probably looked like a happy family. But I knew better. Years of criticism sat beneath those smiles. Years of comparisons. Years of feeling like I would never be enough. Megan leaned closer. You okay? Yeah. That answer sounded fake. I laughed quietly. Maybe a little. You can survive one dinner. I hope so. Just stay near me. Deal. As I watched Ryan laughing with relatives, I felt that familiar ache. No matter how hard I worked, no matter how honest I tried to be, I always seemed trapped inside a role they had written for me years before that night. I nodded, trying to believe her. Still, something felt different that night. The smiles looked forced. The jokes felt sharper. The room seemed tense in a way I couldn't explain. I looked around the table and saw people pretending everything was perfect. For some reason, the sight made me uneasy. I told myself to endure one more dinner. Just one more night. I had no idea that before the evening ended, everything I believed about my family, my future, and myself would begin to change forever. Dinner had barely started when Ryan decided to make himself the center of attention. He raised his glass and smiled. Before we celebrate Mom and Dad, I think we should recognize Ethan's truck for surviving another year. Laughter spread around the table. I forced a grin. Very funny. No, seriously, Ryan said. That thing belongs in a museum. More laughter followed. I looked down at my plate. Megan leaned toward me. Ignore him. I'm trying. Ryan pointed at me. You know what amazes me? Ethan fixes cars all day but refuses to buy a better one. I buy what I can afford. Exactly my point. Uncle Frank laughed loudly. That truck is probably his retirement plan. The table erupted again. I felt heat rise in my face. My father stayed silent. My mother smiled awkwardly but said nothing. That hurt more than the jokes. Sophie took a sip of water. Ryan, leave him alone. For a moment, I felt grateful. Then she added, besides, the truck isn't the issue. I looked at her. What is the issue? She shrugged. You had so much potential. The words landed harder than she realized. I'm doing fine. You could have done more. There it is, Ryan said. Dr. Sophie has spoken. Sophie ignored him and looked at me. I'm not trying to be mean. Then what are you trying to be? Honest. I looked away. People always called it honesty when they wanted to criticize me. The conversation moved on for a few minutes. I hoped the worst was over. I was wrong. Uncle Frank pointed his fork at me. Remember when Ethan said he was going to open 3 repair shops? I groaned. Please don't. Oh, come on, he said. That was funny. I was 22. And now you have 1 shop instead of 3. Several relatives laughed again. Dreams are free, Ryan added. I clenched my jaw. Megan spoke up. At least he built something himself. The table grew quieter. Ryan smirked. Defending him again? Someone should. I appreciated her support, but I could tell Ryan enjoyed the attention too much to stop. My mother suddenly joined the conversation. Ryan works with major clients now. I immediately knew where this was going. She smiled proudly. 1 client paid him more in a month than most people earn in a year. Ryan nodded modestly. My mother turned toward me. Imagine what you could have achieved if you had stayed in school. The room became painfully quiet. I felt every eye on me. I like my life, Mom. Do you? The question stung. Yes. She looked unconvinced. You always settled. Something inside me twisted. For years I had listened to comparisons. Ryan the successful lawyer. Sophie the respected doctor. Ethan the disappointment. No matter what I accomplished, it never counted. I repaired cars for people who depended on them. I employed workers. I paid my bills. Yet somehow I was still the family failure. Mom, Megan said carefully, I think Ethan's doing all right. My mother sighed. You always protect him. Maybe because nobody else does. Silence followed. I glanced at Megan. She offered a small encouraging smile. I tried to smile back. Inside, I felt exhausted. The voices around me began blending together. As relatives talked, old memories surfaced. Every report card that wasn't good enough. Every family gathering where Ryan received praise. Every moment someone asked why I wasn't more like my siblings. I remembered standing at my high school graduation. My father had shaken my hand. Then he spent the rest of the evening talking about Ryan's law school acceptance. I remembered opening my repair shop. My mother asked if I had a backup plan. Those memories returned one after another. Each one reopened an old wound. I started wondering whether they had ever truly seen me. Maybe they only saw rankings. Income. Degrees. Status. Maybe love had conditions. Maybe I had failed those conditions years ago. Ryan's voice pulled me back. Hey, Ethan. I looked up. What? He grinned. Tell everyone your yearly income. My stomach dropped. No. Why not? Because it's none of your business. Ryan laughed. I think we all know why. Several relatives chuckled. Then Uncle Frank delivered the final blow. He raised his glass and said, to Ethan, the family's longest-running failed investment. The table exploded with laughter. Even people who looked uncomfortable didn't stop it. I stared at my plate. My chest felt tight. For the first time that night, I wasn't sure I could stay seated much longer. I glanced toward the front door and wished for an excuse to leave. Nobody noticed. Nobody asked if I was all right. The laughter kept rolling across the table while I sat frozen in my chair, fighting the urge to stand up, walk out, and never return. I was seconds away from leaving. Uncle Frank's joke still echoed through the room. To Ethan, the family's longest-running failed investment. The laughter continued. I stared at my plate and wondered why I had come at all. Then the doorbell rang. The sound cut through the room. Everyone fell silent. My mother frowned. Are we expecting someone? My father shook his head. I don't think so. Ryan smirked. Maybe another relative came to watch Ethan's career documentary. A few people laughed again. I ignored him. My father stood and walked toward the front door. A moment later, I heard a surprised voice. Benjamin? My head snapped up. Benjamin? That couldn't be possible. Seconds later, a tall older man stepped into the dining room. His gray suit looked expensive. His posture was confident. His expression was calm. I immediately recognized him. Mr. Hayes? The man smiled the moment he saw me. Ethan. My family looked confused. Ryan whispered, You know him? I nodded slowly. Yeah. Benjamin walked directly toward me. Then he extended his hand. It's good to see you again. I stood and shook it. You too, sir. No need for sir. He laughed. After everything you've done for me, Benjamin is fine. The room became very quiet. I could practically feel everyone's confusion. My mother blinked. Ethan, who is this? Benjamin turned toward her. My name is Benjamin Hayes. Several relatives gasped. Even Ryan looked surprised. Everyone knew the name. Benjamin Hayes was one of the most successful businessmen in the state. My father looked stunned. Benjamin Hayes. The same one. Ryan immediately stood. Mr. Hayes, I'm Ryan Carter. We haven't met, but I've followed your business career for years. Benjamin nodded politely. Nice to meet you. Ryan smiled proudly. Please, sit down. The way he said it made me laugh inside. He already assumed Benjamin had come for him. Apparently, everyone else thought the same. My mother smiled. Ryan is a lawyer. Yes, Ryan added quickly. Corporate law. Benjamin nodded again. That's nice. Then he looked back at me. How have you been, Ethan? The room froze. Ryan's smile disappeared. Good, I answered. Busy with work. Still putting everyone else's needs ahead of your own? I laughed. Probably. That hasn't changed. My father looked between us. How exactly do you know each other? Benjamin pulled out a chair. It's actually a wonderful story. I suddenly felt nervous. Benjamin. No. He smiled. Tonight, I'm telling it. Everyone listened. Benjamin folded his hands. About 4 years ago, my car broke down outside town. I remembered the day immediately. It was raining, I said. Yes. Benjamin nodded. Very heavily. He looked around the table. My phone battery was dead. My car wouldn't start. I was stranded. What happened? Sophie asked. Benjamin pointed toward me. Your brother happened. The room stayed silent. I found a repair shop nearby, Benjamin continued. This young man spent hours fixing my vehicle. Ryan shrugged. That's his job. Benjamin smiled. You're right. Then his expression changed. But that's not the impressive part. Everyone listened carefully. When the repairs were finished, I asked him for the bill. I knew exactly what was coming. Benjamin looked directly at my family. Do you know what Ethan said? Nobody answered. He said, You look like you've had a rough day. Just get home safely. My mother blinked. What? Benjamin nodded. He refused to charge me. Ryan frowned. Why would he do that? I shrugged. You look like you needed a break. Benjamin laughed. That's exactly what he said. The room remained silent. For once, nobody had a joke ready. Benjamin continued. At that time, I was going through one of the hardest periods of my life. I looked at him. I remembered that too. His wife had recently passed away. His company was struggling. The man sitting before us now looked powerful, but back then he looked exhausted. I never forgot that kindness, Benjamin said quietly. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. He looked around the table. You have no idea how rare genuine kindness is. My cousin Megan smiled. I've been saying that for years. Benjamin laughed. Then you're one of the smart ones. Several relatives shifted uncomfortably. I could see confusion spreading across their faces. Minutes earlier they had been laughing at me. Now one of the most successful men they had ever met was praising me. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Ryan crossed his arms. Helping someone once doesn't make Ethan a saint. Benjamin looked at him calmly. No. Then he smiled. But helping people consistently says a lot about character. Nobody responded. The room felt completely different now. The confidence Ryan had enjoyed earlier was fading. The certainty my family carried about who I was seemed to be cracking. For the first time all evening, nobody was looking down on me. Instead, they were looking at me with curiosity. Almost as if they were seeing me for the first time. Benjamin leaned back in his chair. I've known Ethan for years now. My mother looked surprised. Years? Yes. Benjamin smiled at me. And if you'll allow me, I'd like to tell everyone a few more stories about the man sitting at this table. I felt every eye turn toward me. The laughter was gone. The mockery had vanished. Something was changing. And for the first time that night, the balance of power was no longer on their side. The room stayed silent after Benjamin spoke. Nobody seemed to know what to say. For years, my family had controlled the conversation whenever I was around. They decided who was successful, who was respected, and who deserved praise. Tonight felt different. Benjamin looked around the table and smiled. Should I continue? My father nodded slowly. I think we would all like to hear more. Ryan crossed his arms. I'm sure this will be interesting. Benjamin ignored the sarcasm. A few years after we met, I visited Ethan's shop again. I sighed. Benjamin. No. He laughed. You've hidden long enough. Several relatives exchanged curious looks. What happened? Sophie asked. Benjamin leaned forward. I found him repairing equipment for a community center. My mother frowned. A community center? Yes. He looked at me. Tell them. There's nothing to tell. Ethan. I knew he wasn't going to let it go. The center couldn't afford repairs, I said quietly. And? Benjamin asked. So I fixed everything. For free, he added. The room fell silent again. Uncle Frank looked confused. You spent an entire weekend doing that? Yeah. Why? I shrugged. They needed help. Benjamin pointed at me. That answer right there. What about it? Ryan asked. Benjamin looked directly at him. Most people ask what they gain before helping others. Ryan didn't respond. Benjamin continued. Ethan never does. I stared at my glass. Compliments still felt uncomfortable. Especially in front of people who spent years criticizing me. Megan smiled. I remember that weekend. Several heads turned toward her. You do? Sophie asked. Of course. She laughed softly. He cancelled plans with me because he was helping that center. My mother looked surprised. You never told us. I almost laughed. When would I have? Nobody answered. Because we all knew the truth. My family never asked. Benjamin continued speaking. Do you know something else? What? My father asked. I visited that center last year. He smiled. They still talk about Ethan. I felt my face warm. Benjamin. No. He pointed at me. You spent years letting people underestimate you. Tonight, they can listen. For once, I didn't argue. Maybe because I was tired. Maybe because part of me wanted someone to know the truth. Benjamin looked toward my parents. Do you know how many people this young man has helped? My father hesitated. No. Neither do I. Benjamin smiled sadly. Because he never keeps count. The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they praised me. Because someone had actually noticed. For years, I had worked quietly. I never expected rewards. I never expected recognition. But I had hoped my family would see me. Even once. Instead, they only saw what I lacked. A degree. A fancy title. A larger paycheck. Nothing else seemed to matter. Megan suddenly spoke again. There was also Mrs. Thompson. I groaned. Oh no. She laughed. Oh yes. My mother looked confused. Who's Mrs. Thompson? An elderly woman who lived near Ethan's shop. I knew exactly where this was going. Her car had broken down several times. She couldn't afford repairs. I had fixed it anyway. Megan smiled. He spent months helping her. It wasn't a big deal. It was to her. Benjamin nodded. That's the pattern I've noticed. What pattern? Sophie asked. He helps people and then acts like it was nothing. Nobody laughed this time. Nobody rolled their eyes. Nobody made a joke. The room felt strangely uncomfortable. Not because of me. Because people were beginning to realize how little they actually knew about my life. Ryan finally broke the silence. This doesn't prove anything. Everyone looked at him. He shrugged. Lots of people volunteer. Benjamin nodded. True. Then what's the point? Benjamin smiled calmly. The point is that success isn't measured the same way by everyone. Ryan leaned back. Money still matters. Of course it does. Benjamin's voice remained calm. But character matters more. The room became quiet again. Ryan looked annoyed. Benjamin continued. I've met billionaires I wouldn't trust with $10. Nobody spoke. Yet I would trust Ethan with my life. Those words hit me like a wave. I looked at Benjamin. He wasn't exaggerating. He genuinely meant it. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My father slowly lowered his eyes. I noticed something in his expression. Regret. The realization surprised me. He looked at me differently now. Not as a disappointment. Not as a problem. As a person. A real person. Maybe for the first time. Ethan, he said quietly. I looked up. Yes? How many other things don't we know about? I laughed softly. Probably a lot. Nobody smiled. Because it wasn't really a joke. Years of distance separated us. Years of assumptions. Years of conversations that never happened. My mother looked emotional. Why didn't you tell us these things? I stared at her. Then I answered honestly. Because every time I tried talking about my life, someone changed the subject to Ryan or Sophie. The words landed heavily. My mother looked down. Sophie looked guilty. Even Uncle Frank suddenly found his plate very interesting. For the first time that evening, nobody had a defense. Nobody had an excuse. I sat quietly as the silence stretched across the table. Something had changed. People were finally listening. People were finally seeing me. But despite the relief, the old pain remained. One night couldn't erase years of hurt. One conversation couldn't heal a lifetime of feeling invisible. Still, as I looked around the room, I realized something important. For the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting to prove my worth. The truth was doing that for me. The silence after my last words felt heavier than anything that had happened that night. Nobody rushed to defend themselves. Nobody laughed. For once, the truth was sitting in the middle of the table, and everyone could see it. My mother stared down at her hands. My father remained unusually quiet. Ryan looked annoyed that the attention was no longer on him. Benjamin took a sip of water. Then he said something that changed the entire evening again. You know, this family reminds me of a meeting I had years ago. Ryan looked up. What meeting? Benjamin smiled slightly. One involving you. The room immediately became tense. Ryan frowned. What are you talking about? I met you 3 years ago. Ryan blinked. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. Benjamin folded his hands. You just don't remember. I watched confusion spread across the table. My father looked surprised. You know Ryan too? Benjamin nodded. I offered him an opportunity. Ryan's expression changed instantly. That's not relevant. My father frowned. What opportunity? Benjamin looked at Ryan. Would you like to explain? Ryan didn't answer. That told everyone enough. Benjamin sighed. I was looking for legal advisors for a new business project. Sophie's eyes widened. You offered Ryan that position? I considered him. The room became silent again. My father looked impressed. Ryan never mentioned this. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't finalized. Benjamin nodded. Because it never happened. Why not? My mother asked. Benjamin's answer came calmly. Because Ryan convinced me not to hire him. Ryan's face turned red. What does that mean? It means exactly what it sounds like. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Benjamin continued. During our meetings, Ryan spent most of his time talking about himself. Ryan laughed nervously. Confidence isn't a crime. No. Benjamin nodded. But arrogance is expensive. The words landed hard. I watched Ryan's jaw tighten. Benjamin continued. When I asked about teamwork, he criticized former co-workers. When I asked about leadership, he took credit for other people's work. When I asked about honesty, he lied. The room froze. My father looked shocked. Ryan. Ryan immediately shook his head. He's exaggerating. Benjamin didn't react. I wish I was. My mother looked pale. Is this true? Ryan slammed his hand lightly against the table. Why are we talking about this? Because you've spent years judging Ethan, Benjamin replied. His voice remained calm. You treated success like it was proof of character. Nobody interrupted him. Tonight proves otherwise. Ryan looked furious. You don't know me. Benjamin met his eyes. I know enough. The room felt smaller. Tighter. The perfect image of my brother was beginning to crack. And nobody knew how to handle it. Then something unexpected happened. Sophie spoke. I understand him. Everyone looked at her. What? Ryan asked. Sophie lowered her eyes. I understand why he acts that way. Ryan looked confused. What are you talking about? She exhaled slowly. I spent years trying to be perfect too. The room grew quiet. My mother looked surprised. Sophie? She nodded. You always compared us. My mother's eyes widened. I only wanted the best for you. I know. Sophie's voice softened. But it felt like love depended on achievement. Nobody spoke. Every test. Every grade. Every accomplishment. I always felt like I had to earn approval. I could hear emotion in her voice. For the first time, I realized she carried wounds too. Different from mine. But still wounds. She looked toward me. Maybe that's why I judged you. I frowned. What do you mean? You stopped playing the game. I stared at her. You built your own life. Her eyes filled with regret. And I convinced myself you were wasting your potential because I couldn't understand how you were brave enough to stop chasing approval. The room became silent. I wasn't expecting that. Neither was anyone else. My mother covered her mouth. Tears appeared in her eyes. Oh my God. Sophie's confession seemed to break something inside her. She looked at me. Really looked at me. Not at the mechanic. Not at the son who never finished college. At me. Ethan, she whispered. Yes? I'm sorry. The words sounded genuine. Painfully genuine. I didn't know what to say. For years, I imagined hearing an apology. Now that it had happened, I felt strangely numb. My mother suddenly began crying. I did this. No, my father said. We did. She shook her head. I compared them constantly. Her voice cracked. I thought it would motivate them. I remained silent. Because arguing felt pointless. The damage already existed. My father looked at me. I should have stopped it. I could hear regret in his voice. Real regret. Not excuses. Not explanations. Just regret. Across the table, Ryan rolled his eyes. Oh, come on. Everyone turned toward him. This is ridiculous. Sophie stared at him. Seriously? Yes. He laughed bitterly. Now everyone is acting like Ethan is some kind of victim. The room immediately became tense again. Benjamin shook his head. There it is. There what is? Ryan snapped. The inability to take responsibility. Ryan stood up. I've done nothing wrong. Nobody answered. Because the silence itself was the answer. For the first time in years, the people who had spent so much time judging me were being forced to examine themselves. Some accepted what they saw. Others didn't. Ryan clearly belonged in the second group. As I looked around the table, I felt something strange. Not victory. Not revenge. Just relief. The truth was finally out. And no one could pretend otherwise anymore. The tension from dinner lingered long after the plates were cleared. Most of the relatives had stopped talking. Some looked embarrassed. Others avoided eye contact altogether. Ryan stayed angry, pacing around the living room while everyone else tried to process what had happened. I was standing near the back porch when Benjamin approached me. Got a minute? He asked. Sure. He nodded toward the yard. Let's take a walk. I followed him outside. The evening air felt cooler than before. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Then Benjamin stopped beside a large oak tree. You handled tonight better than most people would have. I laughed quietly. I don't know about that. You stayed. Barely. He smiled. Still counts. I looked down at the grass. Thanks for what you said in there. I only told the truth. Maybe. No maybe about it. I smiled. Benjamin grew serious. Actually, there's another reason I came tonight. I frowned. What do you mean? He folded his hands behind his back. I've been planning my retirement. The statement surprised me. You? Yes. I thought you'd work forever. So did I. We both laughed. Then his expression became thoughtful. Retirement creates a problem. What kind of problem? I need someone I can trust. I stared at him. Okay. Someone honest. I nodded slowly. Okay. Someone who cares about people. I suddenly had a strange feeling about where this conversation was heading. Benjamin. He smiled. Yes. You can't be serious. I am. My heart started beating faster. You want me? I do. To do what? To help manage one of my companies. I honestly thought I had misunderstood him. I blinked several times. Wait. Benjamin laughed. That was my reaction when my mentor asked me the same thing. No. I shook my head. You run a company worth millions. Yes. And you want a mechanic. No. He pointed at me. I want Ethan Carter. I didn't know what to say. The entire idea felt impossible. Benjamin, I don't have a business degree. You have something better. What's that? Character. I looked away. Nobody had ever offered me an opportunity like this. Not because they believed in me. Not because they trusted me. The feeling was almost overwhelming. Why me? I asked quietly. Benjamin answered without hesitation. Because I've spent years watching who you are when nobody is looking. I felt my throat tighten. For so much of my life, I had felt invisible. Now someone was telling me they had noticed. You don't have to answer tonight, Benjamin said. Think about it. I nodded. Okay. We walked back toward the house. I expected to keep the conversation private. That plan lasted about 3 minutes. Megan spotted us first. What happened? Benjamin smiled. Business. Her eyes narrowed immediately. What kind of business? I groaned. Don't start. Ethan. She crossed her arms. Tell me. Benjamin laughed. I offered him a position. Megan's jaw dropped. A position? I sighed. Please stop announcing things. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Ryan heard. Then my mother heard. Then everyone heard. Within minutes, the entire room was buzzing. The reactions were almost unbelievable. Uncle Frank suddenly appeared beside me. You know, Ethan, I've always admired your work ethic. I stared at him. You called me a failed investment 2 hours ago. He coughed awkwardly. Well, nobody's perfect. Megan nearly choked trying not to laugh. Aunt Carol smiled warmly. I always knew you had potential. That one at least sounded sincere. But others felt different. Forced. Convenient. Fake. The same people who ignored me all evening now wanted conversations. Advice. Connections. Friendship. The sudden change hurt more than I expected. Not because I wanted their approval. Because it proved how easily their opinions shifted when success entered the picture. Ryan finally walked over. His expression looked darker than ever. You can't be serious. Benjamin looked calm. I am. Why him? The room became silent. Benjamin answered immediately. Because I trust him. Ryan laughed. A mechanic. Yes. Ryan shook his head. This is a mistake. Benjamin remained calm. No. It absolutely is. His voice rose. He doesn't know anything about running a company. Knowledge can be taught. Benjamin's response came instantly. Integrity can't. The room froze. Ryan looked furious. This is ridiculous. No, my father suddenly said. Everyone turned. Including me. My father stood from his chair. His eyes stayed locked on Ryan. The ridiculous thing is how you've treated your brother for years. The silence became overwhelming. Ryan stared at him. What? You heard me. My father stepped forward. Your entire life, you've acted like success made you better than other people. Ryan looked shocked. Dad. No. My father interrupted. Not tonight. I couldn't remember the last time he had defended me. Maybe he never had. Ryan looked around the room. You're all actually doing this? Nobody answered. Because nobody could deny it anymore. My father turned toward me. Then he said words I had waited years to hear. I'm proud of you, Ethan. My chest tightened. The room blurred for a second. I wasn't prepared for that. Not from him. Not after all these years. As conversations continued around me, I barely heard them. My mind stayed focused on one question. For most of my life, I had chased my family's approval. Now I stood at a crossroads. I could keep seeking validation from people who had rarely given it. Or I could finally build a future based on something else. My own worth. For the first time in my life, the choice was mine. I barely slept that night. Benjamin's offer kept replaying in my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his words again. I want Ethan Carter. Nobody had ever chosen me like that before. Not because they felt sorry for me. Not because they had to. Because they believed in me. The next morning, I sat across from Benjamin in his office. He pushed a cup of coffee toward me. You look exhausted. I am. He laughed. That usually happens before major decisions. I stared at the papers on his desk. You really mean this? I do. You trust me that much? Yes. Why? Benjamin smiled. You keep asking that question. Because I don't understand. You will. I looked down at the offer again. 4 years, I had chased acceptance from people who always found a reason to criticize me. Now someone was offering trust without conditions. That meant more than money ever could. I picked up the pen. Benjamin remained silent. The decision had to be mine. A few seconds later, I signed. There, I said. Benjamin smiled. Welcome aboard. For the first time in years, I felt excited about my future. Not because everything was solved. Because something had finally begun. Over the next few months, my life changed quickly. The work was challenging. Every day brought new responsibilities. Every week brought new lessons. One afternoon, I walked into Benjamin's office after a difficult meeting. I think I made a mistake. He looked up from his laptop. Only one. I laughed. Probably several. Good. I frowned. Good. Yes. He leaned back in his chair. People who never make mistakes never grow. That sounds convenient. It's true. I sat down. What if I fail? Benjamin shrugged. Then you learn. His confidence amazed me. He never treated me like a project. He treated me like someone capable. That made all the difference. Whenever I doubted myself, he pushed me forward. Whenever I succeeded, he reminded me to stay humble. Slowly, I began believing in myself too. Not the version my family imagined. The real version. The one I had spent years ignoring. Throughout those months, Megan remained one of my biggest supporters. She called constantly. One evening, she asked, "How's the future business legend doing?" I laughed. Still figuring things out. Good. Good. Arrogance looks terrible on people. You sound like Benjamin. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. I smiled. Talking to her always felt easy. There were no expectations. No comparisons. Just honesty. As my confidence grew, I started noticing changes within my family too. Some felt genuine. Others didn't. My father called more often. "How's work?" he would ask. "Busy." That's my son. Hearing those words still felt strange. But I appreciated the effort. My mother tried too. "I found an article about your company." Really? Yes. I clipped it. The conversation was awkward. But at least it was real. Not everyone changed for the right reasons. Some relatives suddenly acted like we had always been close. Others hinted about favors. Business advice. Connections. Opportunities. I learned quickly who cared about me and who cared about my success. The difference became impossible to miss. One evening, Uncle Frank called. "Ethan, my friend is looking for investors." I laughed. Funny. What? A few months ago, I was the failed investment. Silence followed. Then he cleared his throat. "About that. Good night, Uncle Frank." I hung up smiling. For the first time, their opinions didn't control me. That realization felt powerful. A few weeks later, I sat alone in my apartment overlooking the city. The lights stretched across the skyline. Everything looked different now. Not because the world had changed. Because I had. I thought about every joke. Every comparison. Every moment I had felt inferior. For years, I believed my worth depended on what my family thought of me. I believed success meant earning their approval. Now I understood how wrong I had been. My value had never depended on their opinions. It never depended on a degree, a title, a paycheck, or a family member's approval. It came from who I was when nobody was watching. The same thing Benjamin had seen years ago. The same thing I had finally started seeing in myself. The next day, Megan asked me a simple question. If you could go back and change that family dinner, would you? I thought about it carefully. Then I shook my head. No. Why not? I smiled. Because that terrible night forced me to choose myself. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong. I was finally learning how to live for myself. And that felt better than any revenge ever could. 6 months after I joined Benjamin's company, I received a phone call from Sophie. Have you talked to Ryan lately? She asked. No. Why? There was a pause. He's having problems. I leaned back in my chair. What kind of problems? Work. I wasn't surprised. Ryan had spent years believing he was the smartest person in every room. That attitude eventually creates consequences. What happened? I asked. A major client left. I stayed silent. And 2 more are considering it. That's rough. Sophie sighed. You sound calmer than I expected. I don't know what you want me to say. Nothing. After we hung up, I sat quietly for a moment. Part of me remembered every insult Ryan had thrown at me. Every joke. Every humiliation. Every time he made me feel small. Another part of me remembered he was still my brother. The conflict left me uncomfortable. A few days later, my father called. Can we meet? Sure. We met at a small coffee shop near my office. The moment I sat down, I noticed how tired he looked. You okay? I asked. He nodded slowly. I've been thinking. That sounds dangerous. A small smile appeared on his face. You got your sense of humor from me. I'll need proof. The smile faded. Then he became serious. Your mother and I made mistakes. I looked at him quietly. We spent so much time pushing success that we forgot what actually mattered. I didn't interrupt. He needed to say it. We thought we were helping. I know. No. He shook his head. I don't think you do. His voice cracked slightly. We taught Ryan that achievement excused behavior. The honesty surprised me. We taught Sophie that perfection was necessary. He lowered his eyes. And we taught you that nothing you did was enough. The words hurt because they were true. For years, I had lived with that feeling. Not enough. Never enough. My father looked at me. I am sorry. I nodded slowly. Thank you. It wasn't a magical moment. The pain didn't disappear. But his apology felt real. And that mattered. Over the following weeks, my mother started calling more often. Sometimes she talked about family. Sometimes she talked about nothing important. One evening she suddenly said, I compared you to your siblings constantly. I stayed quiet. I thought competition would motivate you. It motivated me. She sounded hopeful. Really? Yes. There was a pause. It motivated me to stop expecting approval. Silence filled the line. Finally she whispered, I deserve that. I didn't argue. Because she was right. The truth hurt. For both of us. Meanwhile, Ryan's situation continued getting worse. Another client left. Then another. Word spread that he was difficult to work with. The same arrogance that once impressed people was now driving them away. Nobody was sabotaging him. Nobody was plotting against him. He was simply facing consequences. One afternoon, Sophie visited my office. She looked nervous. Can we talk? Of course. She sat down across from me. I owe you an apology. I smiled slightly. You already apologized. Not properly. She took a deep breath. I spent years judging you because I was scared. Scared of what? Failing. I frowned. What do you mean? I saw how Mom and Dad treated you whenever you made different choices. Her eyes filled with emotion. I convinced myself they were right because I was terrified of becoming the next disappointment. I sat quietly. For the first time, I truly understood her. Not as someone who hurt me. As someone who had been hurting too. I forgive you, I said. Tears appeared in her eyes. Thank you. Our relationship didn't heal instantly, but it started healing. And that was enough. Later that week, Megan called. Have you heard about Ryan? Some of it. Are you happy about it? The question caught me off guard. I stared out my office window. Cars moved through the city below. People hurried through their lives. And somewhere in that city, my brother was watching his world fall apart. I don't know, I admitted. That's honest. I thought revenge would feel better. Megan stayed silent. But it doesn't. What does it feel like? I thought carefully. Sad. Because he's your brother? Yeah. Despite everything, he was still family. Despite every cruel word. Despite every insult. Despite every year of humiliation. The realization frustrated me. Part of me wanted satisfaction. Part of me wanted justice. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Pity. That night, I sat alone and thought about everything that had happened. Ryan was finally experiencing consequences. The same consequences Benjamin had warned him about months earlier. Success built on arrogance eventually collapses. Yet watching it happen didn't bring the peace I expected. For years, I believed karma would heal old wounds. Now I understood something important. Karma could reveal the truth. But healing was a choice. And I still hadn't decided whether I was ready to make it. 3 weeks after my conversation with Megan, there was a knock on my apartment door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I froze. Ryan stood there. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He looked different. Not physically. Emotionally. The confidence he carried his entire life seemed gone. Hi, he said quietly. Hi. Can I come in? I hesitated. Then I stepped aside. Sure. Ryan walked inside and looked around awkwardly. Neither of us knew how to start. Finally, I asked, do you want coffee? Yeah. I made 2 cups and sat across from him. The silence stretched between us. Then Ryan sighed. I've rehearsed this conversation 100 times. That many? At least. I waited. For once, I wasn't going to make things easier for him. He rubbed his hands together. I don't know how to say this. Try the truth. A bitter smile crossed his face. Fair enough. He stared into his coffee. Everything is falling apart. I nodded. I know. I lost another client yesterday. I didn't respond. I kept telling myself it was everyone else's fault. He laughed humorlessly. Turns out it wasn't. That was probably the most honest thing I had ever heard him say. Ryan looked up. You want to know something pathetic? What? I spent years competing with you. I frowned. With me? Yeah. The answer genuinely shocked me. Why? His expression tightened. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Failure. I stared at him. Ryan Carter was the last person I expected to hear that from. He shook his head. Mom and Dad always praised me. That sounds terrible. He laughed. That's the problem. I frowned. What do you mean? Everyone expected me to succeed. His voice grew quieter. I became addicted to being the successful one. The words settled heavily between us. If I wasn't winning, he continued, I felt worthless. For the first time, I understood something important. Ryan hadn't been confident. He had been terrified. Terrified of losing the identity our family gave him. You know what made it worse? He asked. What? You never cared about the competition. I looked at him. Because I wasn't competing. I know. He nodded slowly. But I was. The honesty felt strange. Years too late. Yet honest. Ryan took a deep breath. I owe you an apology. I stayed silent. He continued. For the jokes. For the insults. For every family dinner. His eyes lowered. I humiliated you because it made me feel superior. The admission hurt more than the insults ever had. Because part of me had always suspected it was true. You really hurt me, I said quietly. I know. No. I shook my head. You don't. Ryan looked at me. For years, I had buried those feelings. Now they finally surfaced. Every joke told me I wasn't enough. My voice remained calm. But I remembered every single one. Ryan looked devastated. I didn't realize. That's the problem. I interrupted. You never thought about how it felt. Silence followed. A long, painful silence. Then Ryan nodded. "You're right. No excuses. No arguments. Just acceptance." Oddly enough, that helped. More than I expected. A few minutes later, another knock sounded at the door. I opened it and found my parents standing there. My mother looked nervous. My father looked uncomfortable. "We didn't know if we should come," my father said. "Come in." They entered slowly. The atmosphere immediately became emotional. My mother sat beside Ryan. Then she looked at me. "I'm sorry." The words came instantly. Without hesitation. Without excuses. "I spent years making you feel like you weren't enough." Tears filled her eyes. "You deserved better." I swallowed hard. My father nodded. "She isn't wrong." He looked directly at me. "We failed you." I wanted to argue. Part of me wanted to protect them. But another part knew they needed to say it. So I let them. "We can't change the past," my father continued. "But we're trying to change ourselves." I believed him. Not because he was perfect. Because he was finally being honest. The conversation lasted hours. We talked about old wounds. Old mistakes. Old assumptions. Nobody shouted. Nobody defended themselves. People simply listened. For the first time in my life, my family wasn't talking at me. They were talking with me. When the evening finally ended, Ryan stood near the door. "Thank you." "For what?" "For giving me a chance." I nodded. "Don't waste it." "I won't." After everyone left, I sat alone in my apartment. The room felt unusually quiet. I thought about everything that had happened. The hurt wasn't gone. The memories still existed. The scars remained. Some wounds never disappear completely. But something important had changed. The anger I carried for years finally felt lighter. Not because justice had won. Not because karma had arrived. Because I had finally been heard. And for the first time in a very long time, that was enough. 1 year later, I returned to my parents' house for another family dinner. This time, everything felt different. Nobody mocked me or compared me to my siblings. My mother welcomed me warmly, and my father greeted me with pride. When dinner began, Benjamin Hayes was there too. The atmosphere was calm and genuine. During the meal, my father stood and admitted he had been wrong for judging success by money and status. Then he looked at me and said, "Ethan, you are the son I am most proud of." The room fell silent. Hearing those words meant more than I could explain. My mother apologized again for constantly comparing her children, and Ryan thanked me for giving him another chance after everything he had done. Sophie and Megan smiled as the family finally spoke honestly with one another. Later, I stood outside with Benjamin and reflected on the past year. I realized the biggest change was not the job, the money, or the success. It was learning to respect myself. As I looked back at the house, I remembered the night when everyone mocked me at the family dinner. One unexpected guest changed that evening forever, but the real transformation happened inside me. I finally understood that true worth does not come from family approval. It comes from believing in yourself, even when nobody else does.